Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show. And with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He is an ECW Original, worked for numerous promotions over the years. Pleased to welcome the one, the only C.W. Anderson. Welcome to Wrestling with Heart.
Thank you, Stanley, for having me. And first off, let me apologize to everybody that's watching this. Normally, I have it set up in my house, but as I was telling you earlier, and I will tell the fans, my wife and I are out shopping, and time got away from me when I realized, oh, hell, I have an interview to do. So I'm actually doing it from my wife's car. So apologies for that, first off. But nonetheless, let's get going with the interview and get these fans informed. Yeah, man.
All right. So talk to me about your childhood. Where are you from?
Outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. I live still on the same family farm that I did when we moved there in 1984. It's a little community called Emint. It is time spelled backwards. It is literally just a crossroads. I grew up on a dirt road. That's, of course, now been since paved. And we were the only white family on this dirt road. So I grew up, being the only white guy, my brother and I in the area. So that's why my best friend since I was 4 is black. And all my best friends, actually the guys that were pallbearers at my dad's funeral last year, they were all like brothers to me. So grew up in a small community, playing baseball, football, basketball. We live on a horse farm. So we raise and have horses. And I've since taken that over since my dad passed away. Moved away for a few times, when I was traveling to Japan, and then I was married, moved away, but now I'm back helping taking care of the farm and my families. And I don't see me going anywhere, actually, until I move down to Orlando to spend the rest of my life at Disney, as you can tell by my goofy shirt.
Well, it seems like you had a very nice upbringing, and playing sports definitely is a good escape from, just the craziness in the world. Growing up with athletics, what was your favorite sport that you got to play out of those that you had just mentioned?
It was football and baseball, and it wasn't until I got to high school that I realized I had a gift in baseball. I thought everybody should or did, or at the time could throw a baseball as hard as I could. But when I became a catcher and realized that I really did have a gift, that's when baseball kind of took over. Even the little backyard wrestling I did when I was 16 and 17, my baseball coach made me quit because he's like, you got a chance to play Major League Baseball and you don't need to be injured or hurt doing this wrestling stuff. So baseball by far was my favorite.
Did you have a chance at all to go to the major leagues?
I did. I actually got drafted at 18 years old, right out of high school. And my mom was a very, very influential person on my life, to the point where she talked me into turning it down and going to college, because her words were, at the time, she said, pros will always be there, go to college, not knowing at the time that, I didn't know that I should have went to the pros. College will always be there. So listening to her, turned that down, ended up getting hurt in college, which derailed my baseball career and kind of got me into wrestling. But I did have the chance because of how good I was at baseball.
Was wrestling something you watched growing up as a kid before you seriously considered wanting to pursue it as a career?
Not really. It wasn't until I was 14 or so, 13, 14, that I got to watch wrestling. My little brother, Kevin, he's 3 years younger than I. He was the he was the wrestling nut. I was baseball. He was wrestling. Watching the NWA around our area, Flair, the Horsemen, Jimmy Valiant, the Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, those people. He was the big wrestling pro. I actually hated it. I used to watch Saturday Night Live all the time. Yeah, I didn't like wrestling at all. And, I've told this story numerous times, but what got me hooked was he asked me one Saturday morning, because around 11 or so on the Channel 5, wrestling would come on. And he said, just sit down with me one time and watch this one show, just once. He said, if you don't like it, I'll never ask you again. And this match that I watched is actually on YouTube. It was between the Rock and Roll Express, Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev, when the Russians had the belts and Rock and Roll had just come into the territory, the NWA. and they beat the Russians in that match with Ricky Morton rolling up Uncle Ivan in a victory roll and pinning him. I think it's like 1985, 1984, July was the date. Um, and I remember Kevin and I, my brother, jumping around, because the Americans had just beat the Russians, and I was hooked from that moment after. I didn't. We watched it, but as far as thinking about I was going to get into it, I never thought I would actually get into professional wrestling.
When you started watching, who were some people that you idolized growing up? Were the Rock and Roll Express a tag team that you enjoyed following later on?
Yeah, that I was always into the good guys, the Stings, more Dusty Rhodes. Didn't like the Horsemen, hated the Horsemen because they did their job as heels. Became big fans of the Midnight Express to the point where once I started getting into wrestling, I wanted to be Bobby Eaton. Bobby Eaton was and still is my idol. My Mount Rushmore is Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton. And
Hmm.
I patterned myself in the beginning after Bobby because I wanted to be the guy that could work a broomstick or flare and have a 5-star match and still not hurt anybody. I wanted to be that guy. And it wasn't until I got in and got the Anderson name that I started following and watching Arn and just seeing how good he actually was and is and still is to my extent, especially with the mind.
Yeah, definitely Arn and so many of those guys, Bobby Eaton, as you mentioned, had a very sharp mind for the business.
Yeah.
Um, when you decided you wanted to pursue wrestling, talk to me about wrestling school training, how you got, your start in the business because it is so tough. It's different from baseball. You'd mentioned earlier
Yes.
you got hurt, but it's another kind of physical work that you have to really condition your body and get used to.
Nowadays it's a lot easier to get into wrestling because there's so many schools. Back then there wasn't that many, and I was wrestling in high school a little bit, and this guy that was an indie worker had his a ring in one of our buddies' backyards. It was literally a ring set up in the backyard, and we would go there on the weekends and just wrestle, just do things that we saw on TV. And it wasn't until my baseball coach made me quit, and then when that fell to the side, I got back into it by seeing one of the guys I was wrestling with. I saw him at McDonald's one day, I think, and he said he was actually doing wrestling now, like at armories and things like that. And he said, "Why don't you come with me?" It was a Saturday show. He said, "We'll get in the ring, roll around, and see where it goes." So I did, caught the bug again, and it kind of took off. As far as being formally trained, I was never trained until I got to the power plant in like '98. It
Mhm.
was a There was a school in a town called Smithfield where all the young guys would go and just work out. And there was a local indie guy there, but he wasn't that good. And of course, you didn't know at the time how good they are until you get into it. So we just kind of listened to him and did things again that we saw on TV. And I just learned as I went. Once I became an Anderson and started tagging, I was just kind of, on the job training. But as far as the school and being fine tuned, it wasn't until I got to the power plant that actually happened.
When you're learning from your trainers, whether it was the first school or later on when you went to the power plant, do you remember any pieces of advice that you got from your trainers early on that you can still recall today?
Um, One, this, I think my biggest piece of advice that I got that I use and I still implement and try to teach the younger kids today, younger guys, is less is more. And if you think you're going too slow, slow down. And I didn't actually get that from the school. I got that from Diamond Dallas Page because when I was coming along in the Indies, I was the local promotion I worked in Smithfield had their own little school. So I started teaching people. I had no business teaching, but I guess they thought I was good at what I was learning. So I was teaching people. And one of the people I actually taught was Lodi, Brad Kane, who became Raven's sign guy. So when I would go to the power plant and when I made there, I would go and hang out at Raven's house while they were at Nitro and things. And Raven would lead the key for us. And I remember one time Diamond Dallas Page come and hung out because a lot of people came to Raven's house, and he came and hung out, introduced myself, and we got to talking, and I asked him for some advice about a young up and comer, and that was his thing. If you think you're going slow, slow down more, and less is more. That was my two biggest pieces of advice. And I think another one was when Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker told me I had the best punch in wrestling, and I was punching too much in a match. He said, one time, you throw it one time, and it means way more than doing things 10 and 12 times. So it's just little things like that that I implemented into my wrestling that made me such a good striker, and the psychology and things like that, because I was able to implement that and make my matches mean more than guys going out there and, punching somebody 30 times and kicking somebody 20 times and throwing 20 super kicks, because I have a fantastic super kick. So I only throw that once. I throw one punch. We hit one spine buster. So it's that one less is more thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the details and that little intricate little things that you can put in to your work that makes it just as better as it was
Right.
before. So that is always important. So
It's the small things. One the small things mean the biggest. They think a lot of people now think big things matter. Yes, but at the right moment, if you do the small details, a lot of people catch those more than not.
yeah, and also the psychology as well about why you're doing the moves because
Right.
that's just as important. Wanting to be able to have a reason for doing a move so that the crowd will react and it'll mean just as much as it is just doing it on its own.
Yeah, psychology is a big part of it. Telling a story is a big part of it. Some people nowadays don't think they need taught that, but good versus evil, bad versus good, all that stuff still matters today. And when it's done right, that's when the reactions come, and that's when people notice it the most.
Yeah, I mean, you worked in ECW, which was just had one of the most dedicated and devoted fan bases of all time. Talk to me about how you got started with ECW and Paul Heyman. Did he reach out to you or someone from the higher ups at the promotion ask you wanting to join the company?
No, one of the guys that I was running with on the independents, his name's Curtis White. He wrestled around here as Toad. At the end of the WCW, he was tagging with PG-13. They called himself Frog. So if you go back and see that, that was him. So he was actually tagging with Lodi, and I actually trained Kurt as well. Uh, so we would run rampant on the independents here in the Carolinas, and he and I were working each other every weekend. Well, through Lodi, through Raven, through Tommy Dreamer, Kurt Toad got a tryout. And the Saturday, that was on a Sunday. The Saturday night before, he and I wrestled the Public Enemy in South Carolina. His tryout was in Georgia. Well, Toad got me to go down with him to the tryout at ECW. I didn't really want to go. You can't tell it from my stuff on TV, but I'm a introvert. I'm very nervous around people, very shy. So I didn't want to do it. Um, he talked me into going. He said, "Look, Steve Carino because Carino was here in the Carolinas, and he and I knew each other. Simon Diamond. Well, he was running his what was he running? Lance Diamond at the time. Uh, Go hang out with them, see them. You get to politic, meet some people. Even if you can't get in the ring, just come down with me." So begrudgingly, I went with him during his tryout in Georgia. So when he did his little 5 minute deal, by the time he got done, Nova was running the tryouts, and he leaned outside the ring because I'd introduced myself earlier. He said, "Chris, do you have your gear?" I was like, "Yeah, it's in the car." He said, "Run and get it on, and hop in the ring." So I did that, got in the ring with Simon. We did a little 5 minute deal. I got done with that. Nova told me I had a really good timing. Um, and as I got out of the ring, I heard somebody from in the crowd, well, not the crowd, but sitting in the bleachers yelled at Bill Alfonso, "Fonzie, get the ball guy back in the ring." And Fonzie looks at me. He says, "Paul wants you back in the ring, Daddy." And I looked out there, and Paul Heyman was sitting with Taz and the Dudleys, and they were watching the tryouts. So I got back in the ring, and they kept throwing guys at me for like the next hour. When that got done, I went to the back. I was cleaning myself up from where I was, sweaty, and I still have the image of that door opening and Paul Heyman walking in, full Paul Heyman mode, black hat, trench coat, just what you
The
see on TV.
ponytail.
Yes, he had the ponytail, so he walked in. He walked right up to me, um, stuck his hand out to me to shake it and said, "Hey, I'm Paul. It's nice to meet you." I said, "Hey, Paul, my name is Chris Wright. It's an honor to meet you, sir." He asked me, he said, "How long have you been wrestling? Where are you wrestling at? What's blah, blah, blah." I said, "Well, I'm, in the Carolinas, the Mid Atlantic, wrestle. I'm at the power plant now." He said, "Do they have you on contract there?" I said, "No, sir." Because just a few weeks before, Paul Orndorff and JJ Dillon kind of told me I didn't really have what it took to make it at WCW.
Hmm.
I said, "No, they really told me I didn't have the looks and what it took to make it at WCW, so I'm not on contract." He said, well, what's your wrestling name? I said, C.W. Anderson. And in classic Paul, he goes, I knew it. He goes, you have the Anderson look. You look like Arn. You have the left punch, the spine buster. He said, Chris, don't leave before I speak to you at the end of the night. I said, yes, sir. He said, you're more than welcome to hang out backstage. So as the doors are opening, the show's getting ready to start. Jim Molyneux comes up to me and says, are you CW? Yes, sir. He said, Paul wants to see you in the back. So I'll go in the locker room. He's sitting back there with Vito LaGrassa, Skull Von Crush, Danny Dorn, and Roadkill. He introduces me to him. He says, you're tagging with Vito. You guys are third match. Welcome to ECW. So that's literally how I got my job at ECW, was
And
just going on a whim, and it working out for me.
yeah, and you were provided with an incredible opportunity, wrestled there up from 99 up until the company
Yeah,
closed in 2001. You also were you part of the New Dangerous Alliance as well?
I was. That was thrown together as kind of a goof, as a play on Paul and his dangerous lines. Because once the Dudleys left, Lou was looking somebody to run with, and Lou was in my little traveling clique. It was Lou, Jack Victory, myself, Steve Carino, Tommy Dreamer, and Francine. We all traveled together. So I remember we were at the Dungeon in Atlanta one night. The Dungeon's a hotel and bar in Atlanta. And I was talking to Lou, and I said, now that Bubba and Devon are gone, what are you going to do? Who do you want to manage? He said, I kind of want to manage you. And I'm like, damn, man, that'd be an honor. So Paul and Tommy come up with the whole Dangerous Alliance, because Bill Wiles and I were tagging together and had fantastic chemistry. I loved tagging with Bill. And they made the spoof on the Dangerous Alliance, and we're kind of a comedy tag team to begin with. Then we started getting over, as like a legit serious tag team. So that's how the whole Dangerous Alliance thing was running for a while.
Yeah, and like I said, you were part of ECW till the company closed in 2001. What can you tell me about the day that you found out about the company folding?
We had heard rumors, even while near the end, after Guilty as Charged, and then the weekend in Pine Bluff. The weekend in Pine Bluff was depressing because we were in the back, and it was like the big thing. ECW is going to close, or there's a really good chance it's going to close. And I'm thinking, delusional. I was like, man, come on, this is ECW. It can't close. I'd be damned if it didn't. But we didn't find out that it was official until the night Paul showed up on Raw commentating with Jim Ross. That's how we all found out, as sitting there watching. And it was like a damn Mike Tyson punch to the gut. I was like, shit, we are done. And I was depressed. I was like depressed for like 8 months because I'd worked so hard to make it in wrestling, and then I was back to square one. So that's how we found out. Paul never told us.
It seemed like it was very depressing.
Well, we were all and we still are such a tight knit family. I've never been. I've been in WWE locker room. I've been in WCW. I've been overseas at 01 in Japan. I've been and now MLW, the original, and now, and I've never been such a part of a tight group like we are. That we were such a family where we were exchanging Christmas gifts. We were literally getting everybody Christmas gifts. That's how close we are. And even, I saw a lot of the guys last April when we did the shot back at the arena where I worked Shane Douglas with Francine. So I hadn't seen guys, some of them in 15 years, and picked right back up where we left off. Ribbing each other, joking, the whole nine. And that family thing, it'll be with us until, our time on earth is done. And that's the big part that I missed. I used to go visit my mom the day before I would fly out. And I was like, all right, it's time to go to work. Telling I was going out of town. She's like, you're not going to work. You're going to see your second family, because that's how I looked at ECW. It's my second family. It wasn't work. It was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of camaraderie in the wrestling business, and ECW. I've talked to several people from ECW that worked there in the past, and they definitely can attest to what you're talking about. It does seem like it was a close knit group of people that really enjoyed what they did, and still do. The ones that are still in the business today.
Yeah.
You gotten to share the ring with so many people over the course of your career. Who have been some of your favorite opponents?
Um, Dreamer, Steve Carino, because Steve and I are still best friends today. Jerry Lynn, Um, Trying to think. I really can't pick pretty much anybody from ECW. Danny Dorn and Roadkill, Chris Chetty and Nova, Kid Cash, all those guys. I can name 20 guys from ECW and I would put them in my top 10, if that even makes sense. But Dreamer and I have so much chemistry together. Carino and I have so much chemistry together. The same way with Jerry Lynn, Masato Tanaka, Shinjiro Otani, the late Shinya Hashimoto. Those guys, when I worked in Japan, I worked them on a regular basis when I was there. They were all my favorites to wrestle with because it was kind of a night off. Knew I wasn't going to get hurt, have great matches, have fun, and I'd always look forward to them. But those, man, the times I shared the ring with Dusty Rhodes and Barry Windham, those guys were some of my favorites because it was so easy. George South, who I still wrestle with today, I love sharing the ring with because I learned so much from George being in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, being able to be just right across from somebody that you've grown up watching or being in there with your friends, I mean, that has to
Yep.
feel good because you know it's going to
Yes.
be fun right off the
Yes.
bat.
Carino and I, we always, when we wrestle each other, me more than him, I always beat him up in the ring. And it's just, I'm a lot more stiffer than I am with him. And I'll do things just, I won't say to piss him off, but it's to make me laugh because he gets angry if I kick him too hard or punch him too hard and then apologize a little bit later. He's like, you're such a dick because I just do it from I mean, if you can't beat up your best friend, who can you beat up? So,
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're doing this for a long time and you're stepping in the ring with someone that you've worked with and have known over the years, uh, it's like a night off.
yeah. It is. It is. That's what it's all about in this bit. To an extent, is having great matches, tell a great story, have fun in there with the guys you're working with, knowing you're not going to get hurt, and giving the fans their money's worth. Because I tell people this, and I tell my students like this all the time. You know, no matter who you are in wrestling, or no matter who you are just in general, real life sucks. And if I'm able to give these fans 2 to 3 hours, or 10 to 15 minutes of my time where they can just let go, cuss me, cheer me, whatever they want to do, enjoy themselves, then it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, real life sucks to an extent when you got to go back to real life
Do you prefer being a heel or a baby face?
and heal. 100%. I enjoy being a heel. It's so much more fun because the people get to cuss you out and call you all kinds of names. I've had kids cuss me out. I've had old women cuss me out and hit me with umbrellas. You know, like what the hell? I'm just thinking these are like women older than my mom hit me. But I'm doing my job. I had a guy meet me at WrestleMania at one of the WrestleManias, and he's like, "I used to hate you at ECW because of." And I was like, "Well, then I did my job. If you hated me, and I did my job."
That's what it's all about. You know, you're playing a
Yep,
role, you're playing a part. You act that part. You're playing that character, getting on underneath somebody's skin, and just essentially trying to get a reaction. That's what it's about.
yep.
Let's switch gears and talk about some of the stuff you've done outside of wrestling. I know you've been involved with a lot of, done a lot of charity work, have done a lot of volunteering, worked in different kinds of organizations. What kinds of things that have you done over the years that you have done to help out in your community?
Um, I donate a lot. I will say donate my time. Going to visit schools. If that, I've talked in front of schools. I've talked. I've actually met with firemen and stuff like that. Um, Talked to when I was a Wake County. When I was with Wake County, and I was a sheriff's office. Talked to people in that range. Especially if I'm doing stuff for charity, I always donate my services and time, especially if it's for a good cause. Um, because that's the one thing I remember is, with if there's no fans and then there is no us. And I was raised to the point where that the community matters and the community is all. That's where especially where I live at, it's such a big heart community that I like helping out and doing things like that. Um, let's see what else. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Do you think of anything? I asked my wife a question. Um, but I like doing special stuff with animals. I have a friend that runs a Rottweiler rescue in North Carolina, and anytime they need a Rottweiler in the area adopted, I try to find people, or my wife and I try to find people to help rescue them. We have two rescues right now. Um, that we're taking that basically is ours. But I don't like seeing animals suffer because living on a farm, we deal with animals all the time. So that's what I like doing is helping out when it comes to helping people find animals because there's such animals can help you in so many ways.
They really can, especially if you have little ones, if they're puppies or kittens.
Hmm.
And they're just very smart, it's like they've
Yeah,
got their own instincts.
yeah, and
Um,
it's never the dog or anything. It's always the person raising them. They always say Rottweilers and pit bulls and all these animals are aggressive and they're dangerous. No, it's actually the person raising them. It's never the dog. Because I've had at one time my Rottweiler that passed away 4 years ago was 5 pounds from the largest Rottweiler in the world, and he thought he was a Chihuahua because he wanted to sit in your lap. He kissed and you kiss babies, and we'd take him on trail walks where babies in strollers, and he would lick them and all the people. So he could have been the meanest dog in the world, but again, it's always the people raising them. They're always at fault.
what's your favorite part about being a part of animal rescue?
When that dog finds his forever home and the people that the connection, because you can always see the smile on the dog's face or the animal's face when it comes to that they found their person. That's the part that I love seeing is when somebody takes a dog that was on the streets, like our female, we rescued her because they found her on the streets in one of the cities, and just to see the smile on her face when my wife spends time with her, is something that we'll always take with us because they're not going to be around forever. We outlive them, so seeing that smile makes the world to us.
Why do you feel passionate about helping out in your community?
Just how we were raised, how the community I was raised, like I said, raised on a dirt road on the weekends. If we weren't playing ball, we were helping the families around because tobacco was big in our area at the time, helping them out growing up. And it was a given time because I had a basketball court that I set up where it'd be 30, 40 black guys and just a few white guys, and we were all together. We'd all go stay with at everybody's house and hang out. And you go to the parks to play baseball, and everybody show up. It was a big community thing, and that's how I was raised with being a part of a family. A lot of times family just is not blood; it can be anything, and that's how I still look at it today. Of course, the world and life has scorned me to some extent, and I've gotten my scars from it, as we all have. But there's a lot of good in people, and that's the ones you try to cling to and be close to. The ones that you have that connection and know that are good.
I like how you said that because you always don't want to look for the bad. You want to find the good in people and find the positive in
Yeah,
times that are just so hard and dark and troubling. You want to find that light at the end of the tunnel. It's always that shining light that you want to find to know that, hey, things are going to be fine.
yeah,
Things are okay. You just got to keep on
yeah.
going.
The world is even more divided than it ever has. But when you realize that nobody's coming to save you, you're doing this on your own. You can't blame anybody but yourself to an extent that you got to, as we say, pull up your bootstraps and keep moving forward. And then you got to be there to when somebody else is struggling to reach down and help pull them up. So that's what I try to do. That it doesn't always work, and there's a lot of times that I'm selfish and I don't because it's sometimes you can't help people but so much till they got to see it on their own.
And giving back, I feel like is just so important because you just never know what other people are going through. And, you're helping
You don't. Yeah, you don't know people's struggles, and until my story came out a few years ago, where I tried to commit suicide because of the things I was going through. People would message like, "Man, I had no idea you were going through this because you seem so happy." Well, yeah, you don't know what anybody's going through on the inside. That's why if you haven't heard from somebody that was a friend, or you see somebody's going through something, a simple phone call or a simple message means the world. That's what it took. I had one person to reach out to me and said, I look like I need to talk. And then the woman that's sitting here with me now is the reason I'm still here. She literally, legitimately saved my life. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here.
I'm so sorry that, you were going through such a hard time and rough time, and I'm glad that there were people out there that reached out and helped you, because we're all in this together. We're all
Yeah,
one, and just so many things that we see and hear about. It's always you always have to get people that are in your corner to be with you and be on your
yeah,
side.
yeah. So many wrestlers, and just in people, but you hear of a lot of wrestlers that end up committing suicide. Um, and then that's when the messages come out of like, man, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have reached out to him. Shit, why wait? You never know. You just never know.
Yeah, I'm glad, thankfully, I'm glad you're still with us and are
Yeah,
still
me too.
being able to tell your story with me and share your story.
Yeah,
Thanks again so much for coming on. It means a lot to me and to my listeners that are watching this. Where can people find more about you on social media if they want to reach out or
yeah.
know what you're
I
doing?
asked it. Yeah, everything's at ECW Anderson. You search at ECW Anderson, message me. As I said, it might take a day, but I always respond to everybody. So X or Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything is at ECW Anderson.
All right. Well, thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Sure, man. Be glad to. Thanks for having me, Stanley.
Absolutely. Take care.
Yeah. See ya.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.